Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Undersecretary Colby, you've previously written that the Middle East is, and I quote, relatively unimportant for the United States. You also wrote in an article entitled, quote, "Why Not to Attack Iran?" that strikes against Iran's nuclear program without a clear strategy would leave, quote, Tehran every incentive to reboot the program with greater vigor. You wrote in the same article that military strikes were unlikely to, quote, embolden resistance to the government, and you concluded by noting that it's probably best not to start down a road that has no end in sight. And then in 2012, you wrote that putting boots on the ground would, quote, likely prove protracted and costly. President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have left the door open to putting boots on the ground. Do you agree with them now, and why?
Thank you, Senator. A couple of things. First, we discussed this at some length, actually almost exactly a year ago in my confirmation hearing, and I committed to provide credible military options that were rationally correlated to Americans' interests, and I have done so in furtherance of that commitment. And I believe
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
sure.
Then do you agree with Secretary Rubio that the reason that we took this action now was because of Israel's intent to strike, and was there any effort to dissuade Israel from making these strikes now?
Well, I would defer to Secretary Rubio on his specific comments. I know he and others, the President, the Vice President, Secretary, Chairman, have all talked about the threat that Iran has posed, and I was clear about that in my testimony a year ago. We've been clear about that here. I would say Operation Midnight Hammer did have a clear objective, and that was something that was distinguished it often from the kinds of perspectives that I was writing about 15 years ago in a private capacity.
So you do agree with him now that putting boots on the ground is a possible,
well, I mean, the President has reserved the right to
option.
The President has, obviously, as he's discussed.
I don't want to know what the President, I've heard what the President said. I want to know what you think.
Well, I'm a lieutenant of the President, so I'm keyed on his intent.
Okay,
I think
so. You're not going to take a position on that. Whatever the President decides, you're going to be supportive of.
Yeah, I will abide by the President's instructions.
Let me switch to another issue, because in your opening statement, you didn't mention Russia or Ukraine, and this is the largest land war in Europe since World War II. Do you think that it's central to U.S. deterrence or not?
I think the war in Ukraine is very important. Obviously, as the President has rightly said, obviously it's especially vivid and important for people on the European continent, which is where it's taking, which is one of the reasons why he's, I think, really, to his great credit, trying to end the war, and the negotiating team that's working. I think they're making good progress. But yeah, I absolutely think the war in Ukraine is important.
They would be making a lot better progress if we put some pressure on Russia, don't you agree? And has Russia had any role in supporting Iran in this operation?
I couldn't speak about that in this hearing, or it would be I'd happy to discuss that in a closed hearing, my assessment of that, although I'd defer to my intelligence community colleagues on the specifics. Sorry, your first question was, pressure. I mean, the administration has put pressure on Russia, for instance, through economic measures, and the administration, I personally have been involved, contrary to a lot of press reporting, in facilitating the transfer of weaponry to help Ukraine. So I think the administration is, but the goal is peace, Senator.
I certainly agree with that, and I think the fastest way to get peace in Ukraine is to put more pressure on Russia and Vladimir Putin and what he's doing in this war, and that the way to do that is to further sanction the shadow fleet, further sanction oil production. It is to provide the weapons and the support that Ukraine needs to continue to execute this war. And sadly, we are not doing that in the way that I think would really lead us to peace. Let me ask you, because I just came back from Ukraine, and one of the things I heard, and from Eastern Europe, one of the things I heard from all of the military leaders that I talked to, both American and among our allies, is that what the Ukrainians are doing in executing this war is the most highly innovative technological advances that are happening in conflict anywhere in the world right now. And we are not at the table to take advantage of getting the best information about what's going on, because in the Pentagon, Ukraine has become a dirty word. Can you respond to that and tell me why we are not taking advantage of the opportunities that Ukraine is showing us?
I just don't think that's true, Senator. I think people like Secretary Driscoll, for instance, are incorporating a lot of lessons learned, and there's a lot to learn from the Ukraine conflict, a great deal to learn from the Ukraine conflict.
Good. I hope we are learning. Thank you.